The story is about Team Sky, which is Great Britain's professional cycling team. Sometime in the mid-2000s, around 2010, they hired a man named Dave Brailsford. And at the time, Team Sky had a very middle-of-the-road record when it came to performance on the world stage. They had won about 1 gold medal in the last 100 years, from 1908 to 2008. They had never won a Tour de France, the premier event in cycling. And when they hired Dave Brailsford, they said, we would like to change this. We'd like to improve our performance. We'd like to reach a higher level of performance. What's your plan to help us do that? And when they hired Brailsford, he said, I have this strategy called the aggregation of marginal gains. And the way that he described it was the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. They improved their bike tires, made them slightly lighter. They put a more ergonomic seat on the bike. They had their riders wear biofeedback sensors so they could see how each person responded to the training and practice that they did each day. Brailsford's strategy really came to fruition at the Olympics in London in 2012 when they won 70% of the gold medals available. And so what I'd like to start us off with is the idea that small improvements actually can add up to a very significant change in a relatively short period of time. And this is just basic math, all right? If you get 1% better each day over 365 days, you end up 37 times better at the end of the year. If you get 1% worse, you take yourself almost all the way down to zero.
In his first interview as England coach, Steve Borthwick referenced the 2001-2003 England team and the lessons he had learned from Clive Woodward. As we've discussed in prior videos, England took professionalism to a new level in 2003. And whilst they were well renowned for their attacking rugby and all this kind of jazz, it must be said that this wasn't the cause of their success. It wasn't what won them the World Cup. Yes, it has become more prevalent, but the attack is probably about 20% of your game nowadays. Now, if your defence and set piece is about 50% and you're kicking 20%, that leaves 10%. Now, this 10% is understood as the marginal gains used by Clive Woodward, Joe Schmidt and Steve Borthwick, but you need the 90% first. All of those 1%ers aren't going to help you if the foundations and basics of your game, the 90%, isn't sorted. In top-level rugby, roughly 70% of the game is won in the set-piece, defence and kicking. So of course you need to focus on these areas first. Now this is what Steve did. These are the foundations, the fundamentals of the game on which many of the victories are built, and therefore Steve pushed them hard. This is the stuff we talked about in the New England way. However, while Steve knew that these fundamentals were critical, he also knew that they constituted 70% of a complete game plan. It was always Steve's plan to add on to this game plan, to add on the ball-in-hand attack that we've already described, and in addition, of course, the aerial kicking attack that will rip apart any defence when it's fully honed. However, we cannot forget the skill sets that make these structures work, what Kevin Sinfield and Andrew Strawbridge have added to this attack, the stuff behind the scenes that often goes unnoticed, that are responsible for so much, like their impressive carry statistics in the 2025 Six Nations, and their continuity play, where the creative passing skills of Andrew Strawbridge meant that 50% of their breaks resulted in tries. Only France at 53% came ahead in this statistic. These skill sets are the hidden stuff in the iceberg, where 20% is visible on top of the water, but underneath you have 80% which you can't see, but that's responsible for so much of that iceberg. It doesn't look like it does, but it contributes so much. This is the stuff that we're going to be going through today. We're going to take a look at the coaching of Andrew Strawbridge, the All Black philosophies he's brought through to England, and how they've manifested and shown themselves over the past year of his presence being here. Then lastly, we're going to show you why Byron McGuigan and Lee Blackett have been hired, what they're going to bring to England and why they're going to take us to the next level. Now it's a long one again, so you know the drill. Grab a cup of tea, sit back and hopefully enjoy it. Now, not many people may remember this, but in '97, Clive Woodward hired John Mitchell as his England forwards coach. Having been recruited from Sale Sharks, John Mitchell was critical to the development of the England pack under Clive Woodward. Now, Mitchell's main remit with England was the contact area, particularly the ruck, but he was also responsible for the upskilling of the forwards pack, particularly in their handling and their offloading game. From 2001 to 2003, this was an elite part of England's game, with offloading and their support play in general being at another level. However, Steve wants this for his current England team too, and is something in a workshop that he was recently coaching.
First part of the session, I've been working on the support play, the players and their offloading skills. Go on, pass me the ball, and then I get to that middle, and what you're going to do, because I've got another support player there. Oh, brilliant. And it's world class, and we're joyous, and we're celebrating, yes? Guess what you're going to do?
Hopefully.
Okay, excellent. It's a beautiful day here today. So it's hot, and you have to work really hard, run very hard to be in support. Yes, but left! Love it! Oh, it's a try of the day! Oh, it's not! Oh. So it's challenging, but they've been absolutely terrific. One, yes, go back in the game. Beautiful. Get back behind him. What is your name? Stuart, your ability to get back in the support position was amazing. You went forward and then you went back. Boys, right, Stuart, round of applause, Stuart.
Now, Steve's onus on support for these Colts is prophetic, especially considering he wants this for his England team as well. Him hiring Andrew Strawbridge showed he knew what he was doing here. This man's impact on the England team upskilling has been monumental. It has been absolutely monumental. Just have a listen to what Steve said post-Wales game in the Six Nations 2025. Just have a listen to this and you get an idea.
He's said at the start of the season about really evolving the style of England's attack. When you look at that game today, the things that really spring out of it was the amount of detail that went into that performance. Things like the moving around of wingers, the interplay, the backbone stuff. How exciting is it for you as a coach to have that perfect storm where everything comes together in that game itself?
I was just having a conversation a few minutes ago in the change rooms with Andrew Strawbridge, who, when he first joined up with us, was just over a year ago at the start of the Six Nations last year, and he talked to me about development of the skill development, a handling skill within the team, within the forwards, within the whole team, and he has pushed that skill development throughout from that first day when he discussed it with me right the way through to this week, and he's pushing me more time on that skill development. And it's brilliant to have a coach of his quality and experience, helping the players develop. And I think things like that take time, and I think we're seeing that. I think the team's been growing for a while. Actually, the thing that pleased me the most, I think, is we had a game in round 3 where it was a game that was difficult against a different tactical challenge against Scotland, who did very, very well. And we took lessons from it. The team found a way to win in that game, despite not playing exactly how we wanted to, and then have evolved and challenged themselves since that point in time. So I'm delighted that the players continue to work on the process of being better.
Steve mentioned Andrew, and not Wiggy here. Now, we already know that Wiggy's impact has been gargantuan, but in this game, the skill sets that Andrew Strawbridge had coached really came to the fore. The creative passing, the rucking, the handling, everything in this game went to another level in terms of their carry positions, their offloading, their support play, and it was a perfect example of what Andrew Strawbridge has been coaching them. Simply put, he was mentioned by Steve post-Wales game because his addition fuels England's game plan. It drives it to another level. Strawbridge is a former Waikato fullback who played in the early 90s. Now, as can be seen, he played with some guys who turned out to be some very, very good coaches, namely the guy on the left and the guy on the right. Now, in a magnificent article by Charlie Morgan, Dave Rennie in particular stressed his impact, where his remit in particular as a skills coach aided in a lot of decision making as well as creative passing. However, there are clues in this article as to why he's so critical. The first clue was that in the quarter-final against Ireland, New Zealand logged only 3 handling errors with not one scrum put in for Ireland. Number 2, their first try involved a rapid take and give from Ioane which looked like a netball chest pass. Number 3, that Borthwick attempted to bring him to Leicester, citing the contact area as one of his strengths. And number 4, flamboyant actions on the pitch can be the results of practical decision making. Now, these clues do give an indication as to what Steve wants from him. Now, we've already kind of discussed what Steve wants from him, and if we look a little bit later in the article, it's actually said here, where we can see that England have been trying to marry up disruptive defence with innovative turnover, thriving chaos attack. Steve wants a team that can thrive in broken field scenarios. No wonder he pushed for Andrew to go beyond his 4-week consultancy. It's critical as these manifested in a team that Steve deeply admires, and that Andrew was a part of. Journalism shows that he was brought in for his expertise in the attacking breakdown and his ruck work. However, if we go down a little bit further, and further, we can see here that the team that influenced him was the 2012 to 2014 Waikato Chiefs. Now, this team had a great coaching ticket. Headed up by Dave Rennie and containing Wayne Smith and Andrew Strawbridge, they were renowned for their ability on transition attack, with their unconventional passing and their support play being the envy of Super Rugby. Here, we see a much younger Bundy Aki waiting for his support and throwing a chest pass to continue the move before securing the ruck ball and then getting ready to move wide. Now, I know it's Super Rugby, so we should expect this, but they waste no time, moving the ball to space, eventually going over for the try and getting one step closer to the championship, which they did, back to back in 2012 and 2013. Now, the tutelage of Andrew Strawbridge was critical to this success, as the skill sets he taught were critical for continuity. The support and continuity in this Chiefs team was another level. They got away passes and kept attacks going that had no right to be kept on as long as they did, but they did. Now, if we flash back to part 1 in this series, we mentioned how reactive the England attack was, and therefore how the Lions can get out of whack, you can get players in the wrong positions, and therefore being able to thrive in these scenarios is critical. This is part of the game too, and total rugby is the ability to take every moment, whether the situation be nice and clean or messy as anything. Steve brought him in so England can thrive in these scenarios. His remit with England is focused around the ruck and contact area, creative passing, and the unconventional skills, which we do get onto later, trust me. Now again, in 1997, Clive Woodward hired an old school Waikato man to drive his team's development. Now 26 years later, Steve Borthwick has hired another old school Waikato man to do exactly the same thing for his England team, because the skills he coaches enhance the attack. Now, to show you a really great example, the kind of thing that Andrew Strawbridge coaches, we need to go back to that quarter-final. Sorry any Ireland fans, I do apologise. Now this is a 3-1 pattern that eventually leads to a try, but have a look at Sam Cane's carry position here. It is perfect. He's level changed, his head is incredibly low and his arms are crossed. This allows him leg drive, which means he gets right up to the try line basically. The ruck was secured incredibly well, as it was all game, which again is another one of Strawbridge's remits. Now eventually New Zealand score the try. Now I'm not trying to show this, what I am trying to show is the carrying and rucking ability of this All Blacks team. Just have a listen to the post-match analysis.
Generally you can see how up for a side is for a game and the way they ruck. And their rucking was unbelievable. Ireland, how many times do Ireland have turnover ball? How many players do Ireland have in their squad? Not just, not just a 7 or 6. It's the whole way across the back line, the whole way through the pack. They turn over ball. They didn't get a sniff of turnover ball today.
This is why Steve hired him. He wanted his expertise around the contact area and ruck, and as we can see, he's been revolutionary in terms of their carrying ability. Again, England topped the charts in terms of dominant carries and gainline. Now, while England have sensational carriers, this may be surprising, as you may expect this honour to go to the French with the abundance of Type 5 power carriers they have in their pack. Now, France are especially proficient at this, with their game against Ireland being particularly brutal, but England, rather than relying on pure size, combine their size with an exceptional knowledge of the contact area. Now, while we're not going to show everything, the England carriers on the whole follow the flap principles. Now, these stand for footwork, which is exceptionally important, level change and leg drive. Then lastly, you have angles and aggressive rip of your carry, and then ball placement. Now these are the simple basics that you can do on your Saturday in club rugby. Literal level changing here, wrapping the ball in both hands and then using your leg drive, along with your approach to ensure that you're not being T-boned or making a head-on tackle, is critical to dominant carries. Finn Baxter level changes here, managing to bounce Pablo Matera. And against South Africa, we see the same level change into contact, where literally he rides out a 2-man tackle before actually making post-contact meters. Finn Baxter, in particular, is an amazing level changing carrier. He has such a good low centre of gravity and a great leg drive that, of course, he makes meters. Now, Andrew Strawbridge has worked this throughout the entire England team, however. So if we have a look against France, we can see these principles in action. The thing about this sequence, it's not fancy. Here, Chasm rolls out of a tackle, allowing him to make 3 extra meters. Something so simple and so basic, yet allows him gainline. Now, in terms of ruck clearouts, England used the DAC principle, or dislodge arms, collapse knee. Now here you can see Maro Toje has his right arm around Henri Colombe's knee, meaning he takes him off his feet. With his knee touching the ground, he can't legally contest. Now they continue the move, and again Finn Smith passes to Ben Earl, who uses footwork to maintain the momentum, again getting over the gain line. Now on the next carry, Chesham level changes. He does this because the French tackler is in a great position and will nail him if he runs upright, so therefore level changing allows him to get at least neutral gain line. Now on this phase, Tom Curry runs off 10. Now we see him change direction using footwork, get low via level changing, and then wrap his arms up around the ball, meaning secured and he can't be reefed. Now this again allows great leg drive, and is a real testament to the work of Andrew Strawbridge. Now in the next phase, we see Mitchell take the ball and pass to Finn Smith, who again distributes on a short option to Ollie Slightholme. Now there's nothing much really overly technical here, it's just a good hard carry into the line. Now yes, this is very simple, but it made 15 metres against a Sean Edwards French defence. Look at the start point of this attack, and then look at the end point of this attack. It's all about enhancing physicality, and we see it against Argentina as well, giving every carrier the opportunity to at least make neutral gain line, if not actual gain line. Hayes' carry in particular is fantastic, wrapping the ball, level change and leg drive, making meterage, and therefore thinning the edge for the overload on the next phase. This is nothing overly fancy like the reverse DA. This is the hard grunt work, and yet is the underpin or the foundation of England's carries, which is why Baxter is able to make meterage here and why so many other carriers are able to make meters when they shouldn't. Players navigate the contact area and interact with the ruck hundreds of times in a game. So therefore, Steve is exceptionally smart in wanting his players to know these areas inside and out. Now remember, whilst this is exceptionally impressive, this is only the first remit that Andrew Strawbridge has. The second, of course, is the creative passing, or the continuity and keep ball alive play. Now these principles, especially the CT runner, are principles that Steve Borthwick played under in that 2001 to 2003 England team. Now support play was critical for this team, with the supporting player expecting the break or at the very least an offload opportunity. England used their CT and offloading ability to continue many breaks in many games, with multiple players coming through to take the ball forward. Now the vast majority of these offloads were to CT runners coming through off the carrier's shoulder, ensuring that they had the best opportunity of taking the ball forward. Now this can be summarised by the first priority of this England team being to continue the break, while the second priority was then ruck security. Now Steve hiring Andrew Strawbridge here was an inspired choice. You see, Strawbridge was a Waikato fullback, and this Waikato team were absolutely crazy in their support play. In terms of their passing, you have all manner of sorts of passes that could be used in basketball and netball here, but it doesn't matter. All that mattered is keeping the attack going forward. Now these principles of keeping the attack going forward via any type of pass were principles that eventually made it to the Waikato Chiefs. Even when an attack seemed to have broken down, the Chiefs were filled with players who had the mindset and the skill set to find that little gap and put a player through it. And then once they were through it, their support were through with them, continuing the move until the very end. Now when the Chiefs did this, it did not always entail 100% passing. You see, Andrew Strawbridge was responsible for the creative passing that Dave Rennie spoke about in the prior article. A creative pass is a type of pass used when an orthodox pass, such as the spin pass, flat pass, or the pop pass, will not work. This can be the type of pass where your support is behind you, or your normal pass is blocked off by a defender, or a defender's actually taken you man on ball and you can't free your arms in the right way. Now, the best of the best at this, of course, was Sonny Bill Williams. Now, it should be noted that it wasn't just only Sonny Bill in this team who could do this. You don't base an entire strategy or skill set around one player, and as such, all the Chiefs were brilliant at this style of passing. However, as good as all the Chiefs were, there was only one offload king. When he was on form, with his skill sets, power and handling, Sonny Bill Williams was basically unplayable. He was a cheat code essentially, and some of the tries he created were absolutely instrumental in some of the biggest games of some All Black careers. Now these skills are particularly useful and very effective in broken field and turnover attack. This is because they allow you to find space that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Now we know that England are using these principles on their turnover attack, with Ford putting in a gorgeous little kick to the wing which manages to get the ball into the 22. Now as gorgeous and as sexy as this is kicking. Now getting back to Sonny Bill Williams and his passing, we can see that on many occasions he was able to completely turn the tables on the defence. In a great example against the Blues, Chiefs force a turnover and move the ball wide. The ball gets to Sonny Bill, who has to pass over the head of the 13 to Cruden to keep the ball alive. Cruden is caught but manages to get the ball to Kane, who after committing the last defender gets the ball away to Tikuro Tuma, who manages to finish a magnificent piece of work. Borthwick wants to replicate the one chance, one try philosophy, which is why Strawbridge is currently with England. You see, before every session, the players have what are called creative pass clinics, where we can see Andrew Strawbridge in the background here moving Murley round to block the pass. Also called chaos passing, this looks more like basketball practice. But while run by Strawbridge, we can see him working closely with Wiggy here, because these sessions are meant to enhance his attack. And as we can see, we've got some weird passes that are being used in the practice sessions. This isn't just limited to players warming up before a session, but we see players having to get into a position where they can offload around a blocking player, either around or over them. Now that was mean, but it's all about training unconventional skill sets under pressure, and we can see it has worked. In the Autumn Internationals last year against Japan, we see a kick through where Fremo takes the ball and passes it behind him to Furbank. As his standard pass was blocked by the Japanese cover, he had to use a creative pass to continue the move. Now, because of what I've seen this year, I fully expect at some point to see Ford and both Smiths employ this the same way that Bernie Larkham is here, that Brumby-style back pass that was so lethal and could be again. But alas, whilst we haven't seen that yet, against Wales we see it used in kick regain, where Roebuck goes up and wins the ball. However, we got Curry behind him calling for the ball, and Roebuck hears him. To continue the move, Roebuck runs the same back pass to Curry, which is unfortunately intercepted, but it shows the drive to continue the play off kick regain, the same way that it was against Argentina, just with different passes. Creative passing CT runners and support are critical to England, which is why 50% of their breaks result in tries. In their best example against Italy, Strawbridge would have been happy with this. Varney tries to pick and go before offloading to Ioane, who knocks on, causing the turnover. Now the ball eventually falls to Maro Itoje, and look what happens here. Maro bounds forward, passing over Garbisi as the pass was blocked. Curry takes the ball in one hand before passing to Mitchell, who quick passes to George. George offloads round to Slightholme, who goes over for the try. Now while this had everything, it wasn't the only English example of creative passing. Here Curry passes to George, who manages to roll out of the tackle, freeing up his arms and passing to Genge. Genge spins, freeing his arms from Wilson and offloading to Curry, who manages to shift the ball to Manife Reboso, who passes to Earl, and then it's a simple catch and pass job to put Chandler Cunningham South in for the try. This could have died so many times, but Strawbridge training them to thrive in chaos has assisted them in this mindset. You can tell this is not standard England passing. Jumping up to pass over the top, holding the ball in one hand to force your arm through and draw attention. You got shift passes here, you got passes around the back of the player to make sure that the arm's freed up. You got all this kind of stuff. Now Strawbridge has done a brilliant job with the passing, but we must take a look at how it works with the England 03 CT philosophy. Now CT, or coming through runners, was something that I predicted we'd see at the end of the England game plan video at the start of this year. Now this is something that Clive Woodward used repeatedly in his England team. The whole philosophy is about expecting the break. Here we see Martin Johnson take an inside ball from Delalio, but Ben Kay on his shoulder is coming right through, not stopping, because he knows he's going to get the offload. There are so many occasions where we can see England players expect the offload and therefore take themselves out of the ruck. Against Australia, we see Trevor Woodman take the inside ball from Delalio, and we can see Richard Hill, highlighted in red, doesn't even try to secure the ruck, but he comes straight through in case the pass can be got away. We see it against Ireland, with Johnny Wilkinson making a half break and Will Greenwood coming through as the CT in order to potentially continue the move. Against New Zealand, we see England run missile carry, with Delalio CTing on the inside of Tyndall. And then once Delalio takes the ball, we got Will Greenwood CTing just in case he can take the ball forward. It is the most efficient way to offload, and it is identical to the way that Steve Borthwick has taught his England team to offload as well. You see, all throughout his tenure, we have seen England utilising these principles. Here, Ted Hill makes a half-dominant carry and we see Seb Atkinson change his line to go forward. Now this is a half example, but we can see it against New Zealand in the 2024 Summer Tour. England run block shape and we see Henry Slade come straight through here. He's not even trying to ruck, he comes straight through to try and CT. The same principle here with Tommy Freeman, where Maro makes a half break and he tries to get on his shoulder immediately. And in probably the best option thus far, we have a free pod who pull back to Marcus Smith, who has a 2-pod outside him. Now he threads the pass to Jamie George, with George Furbank coming through to continue the move and nearly gets to it. However, it is knocked on. Now this isn't finished, but when it comes down to it, where it all started was the creative passing sessions of Andrew Strawbridge. These chaos sessions are critical to the CT philosophy and the level of handling that England want to create. Now on this occasion, it was close but no cigar. But if we have a look at Steve here, he knows it's not finished.
He's pushing me more time on that skill development.
Now these chaos passing sessions are critical to the muscle memory required for these types of passes. Now under Strawbridge, these principles actually made it to the All Blacks. You see, like Sam Vesti and his Northampton Saints principles have found their way into Steve Borthwick's England team, The same Andrew Strawbridge principles eventually found their way into Steve Hanson's All Blacks team. Now, one of the key creative passes that the All Blacks took from the Chiefs was the cat flap, also known as the chicken wing. It was the Sonny Bill special, and prioritised getting the arm through contact where the ball could be passed behind the carrier in a cat flap or chicken wing type way. Now, the Chiefs had such faith in Sonny Bill's offloading ability that the Chiefs carriers expected the offload, which is why here you see CT runners exactly the same way that England used them. Now, these coming through principles were identical to the England 03 ones. The only difference was the pass used to deliver the offload. We saw these principles prolifically throughout this All Blacks golden age, with Cruden here not even seeing Sonny Bill but offloading the cat flap because he knows he will be there. And against Namibia in 2015, we see the same principles where Sonny Bill gets through and then offloads to Fekitoa, who coming straight through. We can see Fekitoa keeps on coming, even though Sonny Bill's tackled, and that's because the support must expect the offload. This cat flap pass developed by Strawbridge was so critical to New Zealand's attack, they actually built a whole set-piece move based off it. This move was called the Javelin. Now, the Javelin made use of Sonny Bill's power and his ability to pass behind the line via cat flap. Against Scotland, we see this in action, where Sonny Bill gets a one-on-one with Russell before getting through and offloading behind to Mackenzie coming through the 13 channel. Excellent support in Bowden Barrett results in a classically gorgeous All Blacks try. Now, if we break this down forensically, we can see the tight running lines of the All Blacks chalice shape here by Sonny Bill a one-on-one with Finn Russell, the key to this play working. This allows Williams to get over the gain line, with Mackenzie coming through the 13 channel as the strike channel for this move. Now, the point is that Williams is going to get gain line and therefore be able to offload behind the line, with Mackenzie coming through to take advantage of that pass. This is how skillful this All Blacks team was, with Sonny Bill offloading behind the line to Mackenzie coming through the 13 channel, and he's already behind the line when he receives the pass. This makes him pretty much undefendable. Now, the All Blacks employ sublime support play to keep the move going. However, the key thing I want you to take away from this is that whilst the handling is critical to the success of this move, it's also the power of the carrier in question. Now, this is something that Steve Borthwick is looking to replicate. Power at 12. And currently the mainstay in this England team is of course Ollie Lawrence. Now, similarly to Damien Diolende in the South African system, Wigglesworth has been working with Ollie Lawrence to develop him in a certain way. And now Lee Blackett is going to have to do this as well. That is, enhance his playmaking abilities. Now, you know from the last video what I think of Atkinson and also Max Ajomo. Max Ajomo in particular has been magnificent this season. And as you can see here, throwing a pass like this is fairly incredible skill sets. But currently, Ollie Lawrence does have the shirt. Now, we see Ollie Lawrence stepping in at first receiver in some of the overload and long launch plays. This doesn't even take into account his kicking ability, which has improved significantly and has obviously been a focus for him. He's been able to put the kicks into the kick spaces behind to take advantage of, with England nearly scoring a try against Ireland in 2024 using this. However, as we referenced in part 2 of this series, you need a heavy power centre in the centres to make the set piece work, and this is what Ollie Lawrence offers. He offers this go forward. We can see a really good example against Scotland, where England offline outrun a wedge launch shape. Now, Finn Smith takes the pass before passing to the point runner in the wedge, or Ollie Lawrence. Ollie Lawrence is able to beat the first defender in Finn Russell, making significant meterage. Now, the second that he beats him, we see Marcus Smith coming through in that CT line to take the pass, which he does. Using cat flap, he pops the pass to Marcus Smith on a great CT line, who takes the ball right into the 22 and up to the 5 metre line. Now, England set up overload to take the space, but we can see there's a little overly exuberant pass from Lawrence here. Now, England are learning the risk-reward balance in this regard, because this pass was a little bit too hard. It's the same pass, just delivered a little bit too exuberantly. Now, the key thing to note is that this move did use Javelin principles. You see, the Javelin principles were used to get Ollie Lawrence a one-on-one with Finn Russell to get behind the line. You see, this is a wedge launch. And here we see Ollie Lawrence take the ball to the line with either man next to him committing the adjacent defenders to Finn Russell. This gives Ollie Lawrence a one-on-one with Finn Russell, which is why he's able to break the line here. Marcus Smith, highlighted in yellow, is looking for this potential break. And the second that he sees Lawrence get through the line, he moves immediately up to join him on his shoulder, CTing through for a great break and a try-scoring opportunity. Now, the key thing is that the cat flap has been built into England's attack, off set piece and multi-phase variants. Here we have a wedge launch off line out with Ben Earl as the point runner in the wedge. Now again, Russell is beaten, with Earl running over the top of him, assisted by Ollie Lawrence and Henry Slade pulling him along. Now this sets a new midfield launch point, with Mitchell passing to the right to truck up a free pod and try and commit some more men to fold over to the blind side. However, this is a decoy, as Mitchell passes to a 4-pod whose intent is to pull back to Finn Smith, who has a playpen line formed outside of him. Now this is where it gets really sexy. You see, Finn Smith is going to try and take the ball to the line to bring his penetrator in Henry Slade off him. Now he's going to try and put Henry Slade through the half gap. However, Henry Slade is not the main penetrator of this move. We see Finn Smith move up to the line along with Henry Slade. As we see this play out here, you can see Slade as the penetrator, but Lawrence comes through with him as he is intended to take the offload from Slade behind the line. This would result in, at the very least, a devastating initial break and at the very best, a clear try-scoring opportunity. Now, while the lines of Slade and Lawrence are magnificent here, unfortunately the offload doesn't go to hand with Ollie Lawrence knocking on. Now this is a failure of the skill sets rather than a failure of the concept. Now while it ended in a knock-on and didn't come to anything, we can still see Alex Mitchell here applauding the intent and revving the guys up because skill development is ongoing. And the day is not far off where this pass here sticks, with Ollie Lawrence CTing and taking the ball right to the line for a clear try-scoring opportunity. Now it's not there yet, but the players are still developing their skill sets and the chaos passing is still ongoing, because this exploits beyond the ball danger in particular. Beyond the ball danger occurs when adjusting defenders outside the carrier blitz past them to the next layer. Now this is a danger because if the carrier beats the inside defence, these guys are absolutely screwed. We saw a really great example against Namibia, where we see Sonny Bill Williams' line get him through the defence and Namibia have overextended, meaning Fekitoa can get behind them fairly easily, taking the CT straight through to score the try. We also saw this with New Zealand versus England in 2024, where we can see Alex Mitchell and Tommy Freeman move past Perifetta to threaten the next layer of attack. The danger here is that if Mackenzie expects the offload, he can simply come through and take it from Perifetta. However, Perifetta beats Earl, so this isn't needed, but we can still see the danger of overextending because quite frankly, Perifetta can pass to Surveyor way too easily. And that is because Perifetta is passing behind the defensive line, because the defensive line overextended. Now this is something that defensive coaches have adjusted for, which is why line speed is a little bit more tempered. However, it can still be caught out via this tactic. Off a 5-man line-out, England run their stack launch. Now the key man I want you to look at here is Earl. Earl takes the pullback from Smith behind Curry and goes himself. Now you can see he half breaks the line and you've got Lawrence on his shoulder behind the line practically begging for the offload here. Now this would result in a great initial break, but a wedge launch shows this as well. Against Italy off a 5-man line out, England again run their wedge with Ollie Lawrence again as the point runner in the wedge. Now if we have a look here, we see Ollie Lawrence take the ball to the line and manage to break down the first defender before passing behind via cat flap to Ben Earl, who's coming through off his shoulder. It's something that is so simple and is used prolifically on set piece. However, it must also be said that this is exceptionally common in multi-phase play as well. You see Wiggy and Strawbridge together have made CT use prolific in the England attack, with so many tries coming off the back of it. Off a 3-pod tip-on, Smith, rather than setting for next phase, sees the gap coming through on a CT line to take the ball from Tom Curry. Using his footwork and speed, Smith is able to score the try. Against Wales in the final play, Willis breaks contact before cat flap into Maritoje, who gets in behind the line, with Henry Pollock on his left being held back by Williams, otherwise it's probably a run-in try. We also have that sublime example against Argentina, where after recovering the crossfield kick, Roebuck makes an initial break before passing and you see his support take the ball to the line via great offloading. These examples really show the mindset that Steve Borthwick has been building in his England team, where rather than securing the ruck first, the first priority is continuity, using the skill sets of Andrew Strawbridge in order to keep this move going. Now in the next chapter, we take a look at the unseen and the unconventional, the skill sets that are driving and supercharging the England attack that really we haven't focused on, but we need to. Now remember, Steve Borthwick has hired Lee Blackett to take over as attack coach from Richard Wigglesworth. Now one thing that he's going to bring is the variety in kicking, as well as faster play built off kicking regains. Now we know that the Chaser Foxes and Phalanx principles are still alive in this England team. However, one thing that Lee Blackett has worked on is realignment of these situations. You see, until very recently, the Phalanx would assume a defensive line. The Chaser Foxes and Phalanx go up with the Chaser going forward to tap the ball back to his Foxes who can secure the ball. After that you then have a kick chase line that can be used, but now England have a 3-2-1 attack shape set up. JVP passes to the 3-pod, who if he pulls back to forward has Stewart behind the 2-pod who is able to move the ball wide immediately. Now this would still be against a transitioning defensive line. However, they do this over 2 phases instead. With the 3-pod going into split, we have JVP who passes to Ford, who releases Atkinson. Now Atkinson then releases the 4-man playpen line off Stewart. Now while the playpen line does make meters here, the catch and pass dark arts need to be improved upon. Everything from checking your defender post-pass to prevent them joining the catch-up, to straight lines to maintain overlaps and catch position for quick release. However, they do make huge ground here because of the space. Space rewarded to them by the kicking game of Richard Wigglesworth. Now as we mentioned, Lee Blackett's attack has great kicking variety. and across the England backline there are multiple kickers that can come to the fore. Now these kickers can employ a multitude of kicks, with Finn Smith for example being especially proficient with the grubber kick into kick space behind, which is a key fundamental principle in the Vesty attack. For example, off pullback, Finn Smith puts a grubber through for Kemeny to chase because there's not much else on, and Kemeny regathers and scores a try off it. Now we see Smith identify the kick space in behind Bristol, putting the grubber in behind which Pollock regathers, and you have a great initial break as a result of this. Now we also see this with England, with Marcus Smith putting the grubber in for Ollie Lawrence to chase, who regathers and gets into the 22. Then on the next phase, this is where we see the creative passing, keep ball alive principles and moving the ball down the line quickly to make sure that Chandler Cunningham South gets his try. Now we know that kicking is tied with the England attack, but I believe that Strawbridge has been working with England players in their kicking, in particular the back row because of the potential of a set-piece move. Now the cattle that Steve can call upon in the back row is arguably the envy of the world, with multiple players in here having brilliant skill sets and having to actually develop more skill sets to separate themselves from the rest of the crowd. Now, in improving the back row skill sets in this way, Steve may be aiming to replicate a move run by the 23 All Blacks under Andrew's tutelage. The move makes use of the fear of Ardie Surveyor, who takes the ball forward, forcing the defence to sit down and then at last second, chipping over. That the French were sat down means they can't turn quickly, which means Will Jordan goes straight through, taking the ball in acres of space and making a great initial break off the back of this chip. Now Louis BLBRA takes him, but the damage has already been done. On the left-hand side, they form their own playpen line, moving the ball wide to Talea, who managed to take the ball in space and go straight over for the try. Now, I believe that the skill sets of England's back row, particularly Henry Pollock, make this a possibility. Against Sale, we saw him do a wonder try where he bounced two players before chipping over the last backfield defender and having the ball bounce straight back into his hands, going over for the try. Now, this is not the only time he's done this, where against Western Force, he makes the same break, he makes the same kick, and the ball bounces back into his hands the same way, making a great initial break. Now, we've shown today that the skill sets that Andrew Strawbridge coaches are placed into the set-piece launches. The javelin obviously makes use of the creative passing, and the chip kick attack obviously makes use of the fear of Ardie Surveyor and upskilling the forwards to do these kicks. Now, I believe that Richard Wigglesworth designed some of these set-piece plays in anticipation for the skill sets that he knew he would get in the future. The one I think was specifically designed for this was the wedge launch play. This is because if we remember from the second video, the wedge launch play incorporates a forward often as that point runner in the wedge. Now this is something that analysis teams would have been looking at for years. They would see this move run hundreds of times and figured out how to defend it. They would know about the playpen line out wide, and they'd know that the options are to carry, of course, that Benno can also pass, but they have never seen the ability to kick, and kick some more. Now with the back rows improving their skill sets across the board, and Henry Pollock already a proven operator at the chip and chase, it makes sense that we may see this at some point. Now regardless if it's used or not, this is the future. There is an inclination to upskill the players unconventionally, and then use those unconventional skill sets in their games. Now in the Argentina tour, we got the first glimpse of what Lee Blackett can do with these skill sets inserted into this attack. Now in a magnificent article, again I keep saying this, but a magnificent article by Charlie Morgan. Now in this article, Charlie joined Lee Blackett on his 4 AM commute to Bath. Now this article was riddled with gold dust, it was magnificent. They spoke about the technicalities in catch position and catch and pass, along with the work that he did with England A, and his mindset to continually innovate to keep ahead of the opposition. Now I imagine the question you're asking, considering how good the attack was over the summer, was what was Lee Blackett's impact? How did he impact this team? Did he actually bring his Bath principles through to England? And did any of his England A principles find their way into the England team over the summer? Which, short answer, yes. Yes, they did. Over summer, we saw Blackett coaching the same shapes that Wiggy coaches, while in addition coaching different ways to access the space in those shapes. You see, we have to remember the add and not subtract philosophy. Lee Blackett is there to coach England's attack, but he had to show that he could drive it in the manner and style that Richard Wigglesworth had already built. So, let's have a look at what he introduced and what we can expect from the Lee Blackett England attack. Now, when starting to talk about the Lee Blackett attack, we're going to break it down into definites and possibles. Now, in this chapter, we're going to talk about definites, or the things that Blackett is definitely going to bring to the England attack. Now, the first definites that we know he is going to bring is a focus on the turnover attack and keeping ball alive, while simultaneously a strong emphasis on realignment and reactivity, especially off kick regain. We know that attacking off kick regain is critical for England, and here we can see that Blackett has been brought in to coach the shapes with which this attack can be run, where the handling skills of Andrew Strawbridge can come to the fore to move the ball wide. Now, there's one thing that we do know 1000%, and that is taken from this article here, where he had to show that he could build the attack in the manner and style built by Richard Wigglesworth. Now, this means that if you're looking for drastic change, you're not going to get it. You see, what may be surprising is that Lee Blackett and Richard Wigglesworth run very, very, very similar attacking shapes. This is particularly true for edge attack, where here we see Redpath commit the 2-in defender before firing the M1 over his penetrator and Ted Hill to Barberry to find a space. Bath, like Northampton Saints, trust their tactical decision makers, or TDMs, to play to space. In a brilliant example against Harlequins, we see a Jomo at 10 who fires a pass of the season over his playmaker and penetrator to Henry Arundel on the wing. Now, it's not just passing where they're similar to England. In their demolition of Saracens, the ball goes to Max Ajomo, who pulls back behind his shape to Finn Russell. Now, Finn Russell here has a playpen line set up outside him, but he goes for the DA. He goes for the DA as the best chance to find space is the lonely boy option in Ollie Lawrence on the wing. Now, Ollie Lawrence again has his support on the inside, meaning he takes the ball and offloads to Joe Thocken-Singer. Now, if Joe had been a little bit deeper, this would have been more incisive. However, you can see the same support principles that England use, keeping ball alive, offloading and taking the ball as far as they can up the field. These are identical to the principles coached to England by Wigglesworth. And the key question we have to ask is, why would you want drastic changes after seeing how effective this is? With it starting to purr, we've seen 10 tried demolitions in the Six Nations, and against Argentina, we've seen England continue their development with their kicking attack proving absolutely undefendable. It has also gained the approval of Steve Hansen, a man who knows his attack from working with the legendary Wayne Smith for 8 years. However, he has been brought in for a reason, and that's to take this forward. He has got the license to add to and hone this attack even more. Now, one thing he'll be working on, which he's known for at Bath, is the running lines of the pullback playmakers. You see, Freddie Stewart here can't run laterally because he will get nailed in the tackle. Therefore, he has to adjust his running line. Now, with Slade outside him and Willis blocking, he decides to go for the seam, where he's aiming to try and thread the pass through the 13 channel through to Henry Slade taking the ball through on a hard line. Now this works, with Stewart threading the pass hitting Slady on the hard line. Now rather than overload the far edge, they decide to come back to the near side. Now we've seen this before, with England running off-9 power carries using flat principles to get over the advantage line before setting an overload where they can run the overload attack shape. Now Bath use the multiple options in their edge attack the same way that Northampton and England do. Here we see them take the penetrator, who goes straight through the 13 channel and over for the try, whereas in the alternative option, which we already know, Donahue fires the pass over the penetrator to the playmaker, as that's where the space is, and the lonely boy goes in for the try. Now there is one concept that Lee Blackett runs that may be a little bit more prevalent with Bath than it is with England, and that is that Bath sometimes hide their penetrators. By hiding, I mean lining up behind the playmaker, waiting for the playmaker to dance to the line who can then open some space in which they can run in very quickly to take it. Now Bath have been known to line up multiple hidden penetrators off the playmaker's shoulder. Now we saw the hidden penetrator in Argentina, but we have to have a look at a Bath example first. Now Donahue is running a 6-man playpen line with 2 hidden penetrators off his shoulder. Now he's targeting the 2-in defender, and he's overloading that channel with both penetrators. Now the number of options here makes it a nightmare to Newcastle to defend. You see, the eventual goal is to put Hennessy through the 13 channel as shown by his line here. Donahue's penetrators commit the 2-in defender, opening this channel for Hennessy, and the last edge defender can't get to him in time as Hennessy's line is brilliant. And to be fair, he was worried about the wide options. But all of this combined leads to Hennessy going through like a knife through butter. Against Sale, Bath were able to use their hidden penetrators against the adjusting defenders of the edge defence to great effect. Russell commits the 2-in defender, with the edge defender staying wide to cover the second playmaker, opening space for the penetrator and McConaughey through the 13 channel. Now this was against a very thinned edge and therefore it won't always be this easy, but we have seen this with England. In an overload against Argentina, Fordy has Stewart as his hidden penetrator, Roebuck as his playmaker, and then further out Curry and Muir at penetrator and lonely boy respectively. Now the most obvious options for Ford to pick are Stewart at hidden penetrator, and then one out Roebuck at second playmaker going into the 13 channel. Now there are so many more options than this however, and they can all be unlocked with good catch position, which means rapid catch and pass and release. Now this is another perk of the Chaos passing sessions, because if you can catch in the right position, you can distribute quicker and you can therefore keep the ball moving between the players easier and faster. It essentially makes you more accurate at the game of hot potato, and it opens up so many more options in the overload attack that we saw earlier. For example, Ford passes to Stewart who draws the 2-in defender before putting Roebuck through the 13 channel. Alternatively, Ford passes to Roebuck, who draws the last edge defender before putting Curry away. Ford could also fire a pass to Roebuck, who could pop the pass back inside to Stewart. All of these options are possible with the improved skill sets, and this is something that Steve Borthwick wanted when he hired Lee Blackett. You see, he hired Lee Blackett as he believes Lee can continue the development of the complete attack. Now that the skill sets are starting to come to the fore, particularly within the playpen lines and the kicking aerial attack, where players are able to win the ball and then offload in the tackle to support coming through. This level of skill set provides opportunities, and reading between the lines, it's obvious that Steve Borthwick wants a coach in who will make use of the skill sets that have been given to this England team by Andrew Strawbridge. He wants a coach in who will use these skills. If we go back to the Daily Telegraph and have a look at some of the skill sets, remember, we're talking about creative passing, or the ability to find space when a conventional pass won't work. This is all about continuity, support, and keeping the ball alive, but therein lies the question, what if no pass will work? What happens then? Well, in this case, you may need to employ your kick pass, but how do you do it, especially if 40's out of the game or at the bottom of a ruck? Well, in this case, you have to use your 9s, and this is exactly what Wigglesworth can coach so effectively. Now, this is a known Bath tactic, but here we see Spencer run a cross kick from the base of the ruck over to Muir, who's coming through on the wing to try and get to it. Now, this case doesn't work, but on overload we can see it's exceptionally useful. Spencer puts the little kick pass through here, knowing a missed pass to Ted Hill would probably end up with him being swallowed up, but this case it lends to Ted Hill regaining the ball and scoring a try. We also see it in training, with Harry Randall realising that the pass won't actually work, using a kick pass to kick over the defence to get to the wing. Now this contributes to the keep ball alive principles that Andrew Strawbridge preaches, and is a key reason why Borthwick will want this in his team. Now in this chapter we're going to look at the possibles, or what Lee Blackett could bring to the game. See, Lee Blackett has had a lot of ideas that have shown up in England A and Bath that could be used. Now some of his possibilities I've seen in looking back at my favourite team of all time, though there could be a little bit of wishful thinking here, I do admit. This was of course the Wallaby World Cup winning team of 1999. Based off the Brumbies of Super Rugby, they were exceptionally innovative, with a pattern of play designed to target the fringes of the ruck repeatedly with speed and numbers, using an assortment of inside balls and rapid fire pick and goes to consistently target the same place over and over. There was a huge deal of deception in how they would target the fringes of the ruck with keep ball alive principles, rapid fire pick and goes, support play, and inside balls that would keep the attack funneled around a particular point. Now Blackett has his own fringe attack that he employs with Bath, however the main focus today is about the Brumbies' innovation and some of their plays. Now there was one set piece play that I want to bring your attention to. David Knox as playmaker passes to the penetrator, who in turn becomes the playmaker, passing back to Knox coming round the back as the penetrator. Now the Brumbies score a pretty great try off this. However, the key thing I want to bring your attention to is that this in the edge attack in particular could be lethal. Enhancing the edge attack shape from line and block I think is one of the key things that Blackett will do to this attack. No one in modern D thinks that a playmaker will become a penetrator on the next phase. However, Bath have a move where this is an option, with Redpath passing to Barberry before running behind and taking the offload back. This could be particularly effective around a carrier like Barberry, who has absorbed 2 defenders in with his carry. Now in this game we didn't see a successful example, which is why it's a possible. But again later in the game we see Bath run the same move. Now this example really shows it, with Redpath passing to Barberry, who takes the ball in and commits 2 defenders. Now this in turn opens the gap for the potential offload to Redpath on the outside here. Now while again Barberry doesn't reload back to Redpath, I can't help but think that this couldn't be very useful in the future and may be looked into. On second phase, Bath run a 4-man playpen line launching off block shape, with Lawrence pulling back to Russell, who commits the 2-in defender before hitting Thokana Singer's penetrator into the 13 channel. This allows Thokana Singer a dominant carry, freeing his arms and allowing him to offload to de Glanville, who manages to put in Muir down the wing. Now the reason that I brought up this move is that we see it with England off kick return. Now I must stress it's a possible, as I can't say whether this was a planned move. But here Marcus Smith passes to Fremo, who takes the ball into contact. Now as he does you can see Marcus Smith come from behind ready for the offload, which Fremo delivers to him. Now this could simply be a simple 1-2 heads up piece of play from Marcus Smith and Tommy Freeman. However, if it isn't, it could be a warning or a sign from the gods that, they should actually invest in this. As this, with the use of powerful English carriers, most of whom can commit 2 defenders, is an absolute potential goldmine of breaks and tries. Now, I know you may be thinking this is an old move, it will never work with modern defence. However, we must remember that Lee Blackett is not beyond using old moves to try and break down opposition teams. Now, years ago for Rugby Pass I wrote an article about Drifter, a move employed by the England 03 World Cup winning team and was a mainstay for them in their attacking play. It had multiple options and made use of a hidden screened runner who came into the line from deep. Now again, the Telegraph provides, with Charlie Morgan actually discussing this move with Lee Blackett in the article. Blackett employed it against Ireland A to great effect, which is ironic as Ireland actually gave him the idea for it. In the Springboks Evolution video, which the next clip is taken from, we break down exactly why they used it. You see, Andy Farrell, being an ex-defence coach, is very aware of how modern D works, with this demo being a snippet from Phil Larder's The Iron Curtain defence. Here, we can see players are expected to defend zonally in freeze, a concept taken from League now seen in many defence systems. The use of these mini-units was exploited by Ireland's restart return attack. With Farrell knowing this philosophy is used by the Springboks, he targeted its use. Doris runs the ball back and Ireland set up the two-phase move. Murray passes to Porter, who runs straight at the free unit, with Quagga defending McCarthy, Khaleesi Porter, and the sensational Creel accounting for Furlong's tip-on and the pullback option in Frawley. Now Ireland's objective is to remove the more mobile forwards in Smith and Khaleesi from the mini-unit on the next phase, so Porter runs straight at them, with McCarthy following with Furlong and taking them out of the game. This means on the next phase Malherbe is the catch-up defender, Mbonambi the tackler, and Creel the adjusting defender. Ireland have designed this to make sure that Malherbe and Mbonambi are here on the second phase, as they're the strongest but least mobile forwards whom Ireland want to target. Using Drifter, they want to target the space in between them, and as we see, by playing flat, they send Osborne straight through this hole, who with great support play takes the ball right to the line via Murray and scores the try. Now if we look again from the end-on angle, this really becomes clear. We have the catch-up in Malherbe and tackler in Mbonambi both targeting Sheehan and Frawley respectively. Now, both Frawley and Sheehan go right to the line, with Frawley targeting Mbonambi's outside shoulder and Sheehan targeting Malherbe's inside shoulder. This parts them like the Red Sea, opening the space for the penetrator in Osborne. Osborne's speed and flatness of the take means he gets through, with Creel nearly stopping him, but sublime support play seeing Ireland over. The point is that in their quest to conquer line speed, Irish attack coaches went back to an old 2000s move to unlock the best defence in the world and succeeded. The fact that this move did this explains why Lee Blackett has taken it not only for Bath but England A. Now they run this via 11 pattern, with JVP passing to Kloska who has Tizard on his inside. Now Tizard runs a kind of reverse overs line. This commits the key, or the catch-up defender. Now this in turn opens the seam for OHC's strike option. This runs textbook, with OHC making a great initial break through the seam and taking the ball into the 22. Now Steve Borthwick will be very happy with this as it shows the handling he wants at the line that Strawbridge teaches. But it is critical to note that the set-piece use isn't the limit of this concept. George Furbank, Marcus Smith and Joe Carpenter and all the wingers that we have both the capabilities of playing playmaker and penetrator. Now why is this important? Well, you may remember we mentioned that Blackett coaches the lines of the pullback playmaker. Now a couple of years ago there was a Hurricanes tactic that combines this type of coaching with the drifter play, and it has the added perk of being deployable in multi-phase play off a free pod. Similar to the set-piece version, the point runner attracts the blitz, whereas on the outside the tip-on runner takes an overs line to commit the next defender out. This in turn opens the seam for Geordie Barrett's penetrator line. Now this is something that defences are not used to defending because Geordie Barrett here is meant to be a playmaker taking the ball behind the tip-on runner, but in this case he's not. Now again this works textbook, with Geordie Barrett going straight through the seam to create a great initial break and eventually scoring the try. Now this move takes advantage of a potential flaw in the off-9 defence. Now the off-9 defence across club and international level nowadays follows certain principles. The general principle is that it's a blitz portion of the defence rushing up off the line to pressure the first receiver, usually in this case the pod. Now this is fairly universal across rugby teams, but teams can customise the organisation of their shoot or their blitz portion. For example, the All Blacks put 2 men on George Martin at point and 1 man on Genge at tip-on runner. This allows Genge a really dominant carry against Kane, making gainline. While against South Africa we have 1 man defending the point in Chandler Cunningham-Smith and 2 men defending the tip-on runner in Maro Itoje. Now teams customise based on the carrier they want to assign more to. However, the point is that this shoot can form a dog leg that can be exploited. This is why the Canes version works so well, because it was going against an off-9 defence. You see, off-9 defence is used to the tip-on and slice, with Stewart at short option and Marcus Smith at pullback. Now Surveyor knows how to defend these, he's defended these countless times, whereas what he hasn't defended is Stewart taking him out via an overs line. Unless the next defender's tight, this would force him out, opening the line for Smith's penetrator line up the middle. Now before we get excited, remember this is a possible, but for me it's probably a likely possible. The reason being that we know that Blackett trains the pullback playmaker lines. We know he trains depths, catch positions, whether it's overs or unders, and therefore we know that he coaches these angles and it fits very well with the drifter option. Add into the mix that the England fullbacks would be sensational penetrators, with George Furbank and Marcus Smith being exceptionally fast. This could be particularly useful, and something that Blackett could turn to as he's constantly looking for ways to improve and innovate the attack. This mindset is why Steve hired him. Now, the key thing that we can take from over the Argentina tour is that there was such a huge improvement in the alignments, the handling, and the skill sets within the playpen line of the edge attack in particular. But while this is great, obviously, and it helped contribute to some pretty sensational rugby that netted England a 2-0 series win, it must be noted that you need more than this if you're going to create a golden age. You need the scrummaging that England have been developing in particular, the set-piece dominance, and you also need the kicking game development. You need the defence to start coming good. You need a lot more than just an attack. Now this is the stuff that we talked about in the New England way, the foundations, the backbone of England's game. Now while England have an attack now, Steve wants to make sure that they never go away from their principles, the foundations of their game in any game that they play. Be it defence, kicking game or set piece, they make sure these are on point every game that they play. As long as you're achieving dominance or parity in these areas, then fine. You can then add on the reverse DA, the crossfield kicks and the ball in hand attack with all the handling that Andrew Strawbridge has been coaching. Now we need to talk about how this comes together and how in particular Byron McGuigan affects it, as well as the handling skills of Andrew Strawbridge. Steve Borthwick has a plan for Byron McGuigan, as the skill sets that he's going to coach will feed into other areas of the game, in particular the transition attack and the skill sets that Andrew Strawbridge has been coaching the England players. So before we say goodbye, let's take a look at how defence and kicking will feed the attack and how it all comes together. Now one thing that Steve Borthwick has always wanted is a physical, aggressive, high line speed defence, one that will force turnovers and errors. Now this is why he hired former Springboks assistant coach Felix Jones to deliver the Stormers' defence. This is because he wanted line speed. Now when he left, Joe Alabd, his replacement, attempted to continue this approach. Now at times it did work, with New Zealand running a line-out launch here which England blitzed to and then shift, getting ready for Furbank at adjusting defender to come in and nail Jordan. Now at points it must be said that it was very effective. New Zealand attempt to move the ball wide, and as the ball hits the third receiver, Chandler Cunningham himself absolutely nails him, forcing a knock-on and earning a scrum. Now dominant hits like this can completely change momentum, and this one had this effect. Chandler Cunningham himself, the whole crowd and the whole team revved up, and then suddenly England had a scrum. England had a scrum, and they got a penalty. Now this was perfect Bolt rugby. Absolutely perfect, and exactly what Steve Borthwick wants from this type of line speed. However, it also cost the game against Aussie, where a stream of folding errors led to England being too tight and undermanned, which meant Aussie were able to overload Slightholme and move the ball wide, creating an overlap with which Jorgensen was able to score the match-winning try. This try did highlight some errors in the coaching of this defence, because Joe Alabd had never coached this defence before, whereas Felix Jones was exceptionally familiar with it. So the simple principles of this are the adjusting defenders in yellow jam in on the second and third receivers, coming in on the out-to-in blitz to shut down the short options. Now if you want a forensic view of this defence, I recommend looking at the Springboks defence video, but this is the key characteristic. Now this system put a lot of pressure on the adjusting defender's read, which is why Felix Jones was so good at coaching it, because he knew it inside and out. Now Joe wasn't as familiar, which is why he created a new system for the Six Nations 2025. This system is essentially the opposite of the Jones defence. In this system, England blitz from the long launch position, with a focus on cutting down time and space here. This continues in the middle of the field, with England retaining the same hand signals used in the Felix Jones defence. Now after the fold policy failures in the autumn internationals, there was a very strong focus on correct folding and proper numbering of the fringes, as England didn't want to be caught short on numbers. Unfortunately though, this did still happen. But the key difference was in the edge defence of Joe Alabd compared to the edge defence of Felix Jones. Now there are similarities in that a back row or a lock occupies the fore-in defender, which is the first defender inside the edge defence. But their role is very different. The role of the fore-in defender in this system is to force the 10 to pass early or deeper. The edge defence can then hold their depth and simply shift over to cover all the players in the attacking line. Now they can man mark very easily, as they've held their depth and the 10 was forced to pass early. Done well, this allows for edge attacks to be fairly easily snuffed out, and some will argue that this is a better edge defence system, and in some cases they're right. Now it was always my belief that England needed to be able to master different styles, to be selective on when and when not to blitz. Now one time that it isn't the best idea as a defence is against transition attack or kick regain. Here, Ireland regather the ball and start to move it wide. Now we see the free pod pullback to Crowley, who because of the space is able to dummy and pass behind Freemo at adjusting defender on his out to win blitz. He gets the ball to Doris, who gets in behind, at which point it becomes a catch and pass line. The defence has narrowed itself via the out to win blitz, and therefore via catch and pass Ireland are able to get round the outside and score a try. Now in contrast, Joe's defence shows how being a little bit more passive in this scenario may aid you in the long run. Scotland send the high ball up and they actually regather the kick. Now they set a long launch point and we can see England set the defensive line. Now the pass goes wide and Curry at 4 in pushes up, forcing Russell to pass quickly while the edge defenders retain their depth, allowing them to shadow out the attack using the touchline as an extra defender. Now this passive drift is meant to buy them time and space, allowing them to get wide and cover wide attacks far more easy. It also causes separation, allowing easier counter-ruck and turnover opportunities. However, even with this defence, there were still times where numbering issues caused huge problems. England are way too tight here, with Earl blitzing and forcing the pass, but this is why I don't want Ollie Lawrence at 13, as he can get beaten on the outside. Duan van der Merwe beats him, forcing Tommy Freeman in, which allows him to unlock the wide man. Now the catch-up can't snuff out Tom Jordan, resulting in the try. Now Steve Borthwick has a clear plan to sort out this edge defence, and that is to hire Byron McGuigan. Hiring Sale's defence coach as a permanent addition is probably one of the most ingenious decisions that Steve Borthwick has made. You see, Byron McGuigan is an absolute genius and is probably a world leader in what he does. His Sale defence is characterised by incredible yet composed line speed, prizing two-man tackles in the middle and high adjusting defenders who press and surge on the pass. Roebuck waits until the pass has been made before surging forward to put pressure on the third receiver. Now this out-to-win defence may look familiar, and it should, as McGuigan is an alumni of the Western Province Academy. What he coaches is a modified version of the Stormers system, with his edge defenders or the adjusting defenders out wide pressing high, but they surge forward on attack layer, only moving forward past the ball carrier when the pass has actually been made. Now this allows them to retain an element of depth, not getting overextended. However, it also allows them to retain decision-making ability until the last possible moment. Now, in a magnificent article by Rugby Pass, Byron McGuigan spoke about his line speed defence and how it was able to effectively nil Bristol Bears 38-0. Again, we find clues in this article, with McGuigan discussing his line speed defence and saying that whilst it has to cut down time and space efficiently, it must be able to swim out the back of plays, and acknowledges that a lot of attacks run their attack deep to get around the blitz now. This makes sense as to why the line speed is composed, as they don't want to overextend and allow them behind with a bridge pass. Now he also spoke about cutting down the wide channels, forcing the defence back inside to where two-man tackles are prevalent. Now later in the article, we find out that a lot of the principles are taken from his own experiences as a player. You see, Byron McGuigan, by his own admission, admits that he was never the fastest winger. He talks about not having the pace of a Reed or van der Merwe, so he had to be a faster thinker than them, which came from his positioning. He would defend really high on edges, gradually learning where to stand from D4 to 7 for maximum impact and what he needed to do to shut down attacks. If he was found out, he knew what his inside men needed to do. But the key takeaway was that his positioning became his super strength, knowing where every player in the edge defence needed to be for maximum impact. Not being the fastest, he had to learn how to defend a different way to survive in this league, and the result of this was the amount of intercept tries that he scored. By defending high, he could get into the eye line of the player and knew exactly where to be for maximum impact, which was obviously the intercept. He did this against Exeter and he did this against Gloucester. He was a specialist at this because of his positioning. Against every attacking picture, he knows exactly where every defender in the edge defence from D4 to 7 needs to be in the line. With this level of specialist IP, he is imparting it to his Sales team, who are continuing the intercept trend. They scored 2 tries against Sale via intercept through sensational positioning. And against Harlequins, Sale are in destroy and enjoy mode. Dupree and Roebuck get high in the line to force the miracle pass, which goes to ground, and then Roebuck's there to simply pick it up and run in a very, very easy try. Now this is why Steve Borthwick has hired him. He's hired him because of his genius level intellect for the edge defence and where every player needs to be. You see, McGuigan's system is designed to deliver pressure on the third receiver. Against Northampton, you see the adjusting defenders move up, but they only go as far as the active attack layer, not going any further. Saints then run some off-9 trickery trying to make a break up the centre, which unfortunately doesn't work for them. This phase really shows the benefits of the managed line speed. The adjusting defenders move high and surge to the next layer upon the free pod pullback. Now when the bridge pass goes over, they haven't overextended and they're therefore able to recover to get Pollock if O'Flaherty wasn't here. They surge on the pass and then hold, level by level to maintain the choice. Against Bristol, we see a really great example of this. Now the pass being thrown here is from the second receiver. Now we know that Sale like to apply pressure on the third receiver, however Bristol are way too deep. This means that they're not going to blitz all the way out, but instead they're going to move up to the third layer and then hold their depth. This means that Raf de Klerk and O'Flaherty haven't overextended, meaning that when the bridge pass goes over to Stephen Luatua on the wing, they're able to actually recover as they've maintained their depth. Now this break causes separation, which means Luatu is isolated and Sale can counter-ruck to turn over the ball. You see, this is why McGuigan is so effective and such a good hire for England. With attacks exploiting the edge so much nowadays, his IP here is invaluable. He will be able to coach an edge defence in which defenders 4 to 7 know exactly where they need to be positionally to snuff out the threat. The positioning he'll coach will enable them to defend as efficiently as possible. We have seen this with England, where against Argentina the adjusting defenders get high, remaining in line with the in-possession attack layer, until the pass releases Roebuck's surge. Now if this jam is beaten and the ball gets outside, then the guys on the inside have held their depth and can catch up from the inside, snuffing out the threat. Hiring McGuigan is such a masterstroke by Steve because Steve has essentially hired an edge defence coach. You see, no one understands edge defence like a back three player. This is their bread and butter, the decision making, where they need to be, this is their bread and butter because no one else really does it consistently. As noted by Sanderson in the Telegraph, the edge defence and positioning was his super strength, and this is what he's been hired to do to bring to England. The same way we saw with England, if the defence is dented or broken out wide, the back three know exactly where they need to be in order to sort this problem, with Roebuck being in the perfect position here to snuff out the initial break. Now Bevan Rod slows the ball down here, which is critical for Sale's realignment. Now the threat is not yet over, with Saracens moving to split to launch their back line. Now they move it wide and the adjusting defenders move up level by level when the bridge pass comes in. However, the backfield and adjusting defenders are able to handle it and actually retain the ball. Now this philosophy to turn over and regain the ball on the edges is critical to England's game plan going forward. Turnovers result in scrums, which means for England on their current trajectory that turnovers mean penalties. But the thing is that Steve wants more. Now we know that England train their scrum in order to win penalties from turnovers. Now we know how this works. Defence forces turnover, turnover leads to scrum, scrum leads to penalty, England get upfield. However, we must remember that England train their full width attack off turnover and kick regain now. Remember, against Argentina, England regained their kick and got into a 3-2-1 attack shape out wide where they were ready to move the ball wide immediately. Now this is important as Sale's edge defence can allow them to cause separation, which in turn causes isolation, which in turn can cause turnovers and counter-rucks. The plan is to give England a full field, with which they can launch turnover attack. Scotland have moved wide here, and therefore have caused separation. Now Ben Curry survives the clean-out and gets his hands on the ball and latches on strongly, which he is entitled to do. You see, we've discussed about the back row jackling threat, and England are starting to use it, as they want to use it out wide in particular. If they can use it out wide, then they can either get penalties, or if they steal the ball, they have a full field to launch their turnover attack from. Now this will be a full field attack, coached by Lee Blackett and possessing the skill sets that Andrew Strawbridge has been coaching. Now from earlier on in the video, we know these skill sets are devastating on turnover attack, and we know England have been intensely training them with their creative passing sessions. Now for me, this is the endgame. England have never stopped focusing on their brilliant basics, continuing to build their foundations behind Bolt Rugby, so the scrummaging, the kicking game and the defence, which allow them to get upfield and to score points. Now this will always be England's priority, as scoring more points is the only way to guarantee winning a game. Now that these foundations have been set, we're at the period of the add-ons, where we're starting to bolt on the other areas of our game, so the turnover attack, the standard ball and hand attack, the kicking aerial attack, and so on and so forth. When you take into account the upskilling going on to enhance these areas of the game conducted by Sinfield and Andrew Strawbridge, it's easy to see why Steve Hansen believes this team will be very hard to beat. With England, we're finally starting to see the product that Steve has designed for the World Cup. Now I understand it took a long time due to laying solid foundations, and yes, it can be frustrating waiting that long, but now we're finally starting to see how great this team could potentially be. The Autumn Nations will tell us something, but the Six Nations 2026 will tell us a lot. Now these add-ons are nearing fruition, and we're about to see something smart and extremely exciting. Steve has been forward-thinking and innovative his whole tenure. Now that they have some stability finally, with these new coaches, they're about to take a quantum leap forward. It's taken a long time to come good, but that's the nature of excellence. But in the end, it just feels good to know that we're not going to be waiting for much longer. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That was long. I think it's fair to say a pretty safe assessment. Yeah, both in the watching and the making of. Yeah, if you liked it, do please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that kind of jazz. Oh yeah, the people who messaged in the comments about the coffee thing. The link is in the description. You don't have to do that. You really don't. But I'm not gonna lie, simultaneously having you guys message about that, you know, because you liked it that much, actually meant quite a lot. So yeah, huge appreciation there. Huge thanks, guys. So thank you. Yeah, I don't normally do this. You know, there's like, as you know, I've only done this once or twice. This video after, but this was a big project, and I've got a couple of things that I'd like to say. So if you'll indulge me just for a second, because it really would be appreciated. Firstly, in terms of thanks, I'd like to thank the Daily Telegraph writers, particularly Charlie Morgan. Being able to use their articles really does, I think, elevate the videos quite a lot, and it just makes otherwise it's just the ramblings of former analysts. So having their insight as well, in my opinion, the best rugby journalism on the planet, just adds so much to the video. So huge thanks to them. Secondly, a huge thanks to Tim Percival as well. He's the England Rugby comms lead, and his book, On the Record and on the Ball. When people ask me, kind of what your source is, when they've mentioned in the comments, how do you know this stuff? I mean, a lot of it is down to experience, but the other half is down to Daily Telegraph articles and Tim's book. So I can't recommend it highly enough. Huge kudos to them guys both for letting me use their stuff, and really contributed to the making of this series. I mean, in terms of the video, that obviously this series, everyone who's watched my video knows before that I usually do my videos for a couple of reasons, and the main one is to tell a good story, which I think I've hopefully been able to do this time, to combat what is usually the silly vitriol from the mainstream media about the way that England Rugby or any team is going. And if I'm being perfectly honest, it's pretty encouraging recently, because a lot of the media are actually getting behind Steve and getting behind England and asking really good questions and being productive, which is really, really exciting. It's really feels like you're not up against a tidal wave of negativity, which unfortunately has so much sway over the appointment of sporting organisations in this country. So it does feel pretty good seeing people and the media getting behind England at the moment. But in terms of, everyone can probably tell after this series that I'm pretty optimistic about England. But I think the key word that I want to use to describe England is forward thinking. Forward thinking is the word. And this is really the reason I'm so optimistic, because if you think about it, 2 years ago, Steve foresaw that we would need, to be able to have dominant carries in the centre of the field in order to attack a thinly manned edge. So he hired Andrew Strawbridge, a master of the contact area, knowing years in advance that when our attack came good, we would need that, to our arsenal, as well as the handling skills, obviously, to take advantage of every opportunity in a time of stingy defences. Also, recruiting Noah Kaluri to the latest camp. I know that sounds like something so, like there's been a bit of sensationalism about it, but when it comes down to it, the man is probably the greatest aerial threat, barring Joseph Suwaili, in rugby union since Israel Folau. And when his defensive positioning comes good, he is going to be a cheat code for the reverse DA and the DA options. So again, just brilliant thinking of the players who can fit your system. And then lastly, and in my opinion, the best masterstroke appointment that Steve has made is Byron McGuigan, who anyone who follows me on X will know that I've been calling for Byron McGuigan to be part of this England team since the Argentina tour. In terms of what he's brought is just so forward-thinking and so smart. I mean, to put it into perspective, we now are the only team in the world who have 2 defence coaches. One, in Wiggy, who's the general defence coach, and 2, Byron McGuigan, who's a specialist edge defence coach. The man was never the fastest winger, so he knows everything about positioning in the wide channels and how best to snuff out any manner of sorts of attacks from defender 4 to defender 7. And he's now with us, England, to coach those skill sets and to elevate that area of the game in a period where teams are attacking the edge more and more and more, and it's becoming more and more exploitable. And to think that Steve hired him knowing that this would be the case, and knowing that he can offer IP, specialist IP, based off years of being there, done that, got the t-shirt, is pretty incredible. So I hope you guys liked it. Hope you're looking forward to the autumn internationals. I still think that the Six Nations will be a better indicator of the progress, considering that the autumn internationals, everyone, a team usually needs a one campaign at least to settle in with new coaches and mechanisms. But simultaneously, I still think we're going to do pretty good. Really looking forward to it. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm not sure what video I'll be doing next. Maybe something on Schmidt's Australia. Maybe I'm looking for inspiration from the autumn internationals. But I hope you guys got something out of this series, guys. Please, as always, good morning. And until next time, guys, go well.